Hey everyone, Self-Worth School is back in session. I am joined by the awesome Kristina Flynn. So Kristina, first of all, let's start off. You introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you came to focus on storytelling and the link to self-trust there.
Sure. I have to start with a story. Hey, my name is Kristina Flynn. When I was a kid, I barely spoke. I had a speech impediment, I had crippling anxiety, and at 12 years old, I was granted the gift of my first clinical psychiatrist, and that was for depression and OCD. Like many people, later got a diagnosis of ADHD when I was 35, but like many people that have that kind of diagnosis, struggled in school. Gifted kids on the one day are being pulled out to go to their enrichment programs. And then there was another lady who came on the other days to pull out the dumb kids, to bring them to do what they needed to do. So the message and the story for me was really clear when I was a kid. I was shy, I was dumb, I had chemical imbalances that messed up my brain. So you fast forward, that kind of lived with me. You fast forward, I didn't really come out of my shell until my early 20s, I think. And while I had this really unique and quote unquote successful career on paper, I'd spent almost 2 decades working with NBA All-Stars and Olympians and VCs. I didn't really gain any confidence related to my career and my own abilities, my own values. Certainly couldn't tell you this story until about 2 years ago. I'm 41 now. So when I thought about all that, the interesting part of it is that all those years when I was working with elite people who on paper were really successful, I saw the same thing in myself over and over again with them. They didn't value their own worth. They didn't have any self-worth. They didn't trust their voice. They didn't trust what they brought to the table. And they were just constantly second guessing it. So I had since taken the thing that I needed to be able to help me define my own worth and define who I wanted to be in this world. And I turned it into a methodology that I call StoryEQ that I use to help other people do the same thing, which we'll talk about.
Awesome. So it's essentially people not realizing that they, like I said, that they have value, that they have something special, and that they have something unique to talk about, to give, to
Literally everyone has a unique story. I have,
come on to that.
yeah, every single person I've ever met has a unique story. And there's a very clear way of looking at that.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the, I know as well, you're a big thing on like self-trust, and I would have mentioned the intro. We've worked together as a client. You've been one of my clients as well, and we've talked about this.
I'm going to say one of your best clients ever, but that's
Absolutely.
for you
Dream
to
client.
decide.
Dream
Okay.
client. No, I absolutely adore you. You know, I do love working with you.
Yeah.
And you might recognize this in yourself. But one of the things my clients often say is they struggle to trust themselves. They second guess their decisions, their voice, their value, like you've said about those people you've worked alongside. Why do you think so many women in particular find self-trust so difficult and seeing that value?
I think in fairness, it's the way we're conditioned. We are raised in a society that tells us little girls have to act differently than little boys.
Mm,
Perfectionism, the way that you show up, the way that you're to care and nurture people, like the expectations are incredibly different for
yeah.
little girls and little boys. And you do that for decades and decades where you condition women to think and to feel like they need to get external validation or they need to outsource their self-trust and their self-worth. So your grades, the way that people react to you, the people pleasing, the pressure to be enough and to show up, your looks, your like literally everything about you, we are conditioned that you have to have it all. And if you don't have it all, you're less than. So there's this societal understanding or belief that we have to get external validation for our own worth. And obviously that impacts our own self-trust. We gain this familiarity with looking external. I know that was a huge challenge for me that you and I have worked on. And I think what happens also is that, at least with myself and with a lot of my clients, we get used to, and we're very smart, we start to know and see what do we have to do in order to meet those expectations. So we often then, especially in the workplace, we're told, women, you need to shut up. You need to put your head down. You need to work really hard, harder than everyone else, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as your counterparts. And you need to be humble about it.
Oh, I was just about to say that. And
You better not
humble.
mention how great you are
Yeah.
at all. And if you do, you're a bitch or you're aggressive.
Mm.
Men are assertive, women are aggressive, oftentimes in corporate workplaces. And we're told that's just the way it is. So we get used to performing. And I call it performing professionalism. We get used to showing up, and I'm going to look perfect, and I'm going to act perfect, and I'm going to act like this in the meeting. I'm going to talk like this in my emails, to a point where we have outsourced everything about us. We actually don't know who we are anymore. So it makes sense then. Self-trust in that context, decades and decades of this conditioning in childhood, and then this conditioning in corporate environment, of course we don't trust ourselves.
Yeah, because like you say, the only way we get that validation is from other people saying, yeah, you've got value, and yeah, you've done a good job, and yeah, you can be proud of that now. Absolutely.
But be quiet about being proud of that.
Yeah.
Don't talk about
Because
it.
confidence equals arrogance.
Yeah.
I get that so much when I talk to clients about what's the fears that come up, because you think people want to be confident, that's why they're coming here, or they want to trust themselves or whatever. But when you say, oh, what's your fears around becoming more confident, I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10 arrogance is the word. People will think I'm arrogant. 9 times out of 10 that's the word that comes out of their mouth,
because we're taught not to. And the 9 times out of 10 for me with my clients is judgment from not just friends and family, from former colleagues.
Yes.
They are worried about what former colleagues are going to think
so
about them putting themselves out there. The only thesis I can come up with is that we've seen and we've witnessed former colleagues shit on other people putting themselves out there. So we assume, or we know, that if we do it, they'll do the same. I don't know if that's true, but that's the only thing I can come up with why it matters.
Yeah, I think there's something in there about you wear a mask when you're in a role. If you're in an employment role, you wear a mask. And it's also where people see your certain levels of capabilities. Because I've actually got a client now that when I'm onboarding, that's going on into and transitioning from employment into a new business. And one of her fears is like showing up on social media and what are my old colleagues going to think? And she's not the only one. I've had loads of them. And it's, oh, who does she think she is? And, what I did, what does she think? She's not good enough to do that. And I don't know why we hold such regard to our former colleagues as such, but I guess it's because, like I said, there's a certain level of like vulnerability in performance in terms of what you've made out that you're capable of doing or wanting to do. But or because we look for a different kind of validation from them than we do from friends and family. I don't know. But yeah, it's totally a thing.
Yeah. And it's that resume culture as well. Like, we're taught, I now say that I have worked in personal brand for almost 2 decades. And yet I've never had personal brand in my title. And I never had it in a JD. So for me to even accept that and trust that's a skill that I brought to the table took me a really long time, because we're taught what's on your resume is what you're qualified to do. And if you don't have, I'm sure you experience this with clients as well, if you don't have the credentials, or if you don't have the schooling, or if you don't have that degree, how dare you claim that's an expertise? And yet what you also know is that 20-year-old dude who's a digital nomad has no problem claiming that he has expertise without certification.
I think they say there's a stat that like men will, if they cover 75% of the job description, they'll go for it. Whereas women, if we don't cover 100%, we won't. But anyway, God, we could go down a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah, I know, we totally could. Sorry.
But no apologies needed. Like I say, it's all part of this conversation around self-trust. Because if you trusted yourself to learn, do it on the job or whatever, then you would go for a job description where you covered like 80% of it, because you trust the fact that you are capable enough.
And you trust the fact that you can learn what you need to fill the gap.
Exactly. Now, you touch on personal brand, that, like you say, you don't use that term super often, but that is largely what you help people with, but you do it through your StoryEQ methodology. So can you explain a little bit about what it is, how that works in personal branding, how you generally help people with this and how it helps people own their worth, earn their value.
Yeah. So another story as to how I came across it. I have had a very winding career. It started with that time, that 7 years spent in the NBA. And then I worked in philanthropy. You and I bonded over that. Sports technology. I started my own tech startup, digital market, like all over the place. Doing this for 18 years, 11 roles, 8 industry. And the joke that I make is that I have literally never on LinkedIn, I spend a lot of time there, but in that period of time, I have never had a recruiter reach out to me in my DM being like, I got a gig for you. Listen, this is what because they look at my profile and they're like, that's a fucking nightmare. What am I supposed to do with that? So that's the context. But along the way, I found Web3 and NFTs, which if you don't know much about that, for me, it was really about like this culmination of technology and community and art. I grew up an artist, love art. So all these things came together and I started building my first personal brand through that market. It was on Twitter, RIP Twitter. We miss it dearly. But I built this brand and just by talking about things I was seeing, mostly the fact that there wasn't many women in the space and there was mostly only white dudes. So started talking about that and then it started working. I was like, okay, this is nice. I was gaining followers. I had gotten it to a point where I'm speaking on stages, doing a lot of things that I love doing. I had built a digital marketing agency to work with clients. All of this stuff was going in the right direction. And then if you're familiar with that industry, overnight, it changed. You can't make this shit up. Elon buys Twitter. The algorithm changes entirely, goes to X, and I can no longer access my followers. If I tweet, I'm going to call it tweet. If I post now, I might get 2 likes. Like you cannot access your followers. So there's that. Digital marketing agency. The bull market was wild and it went bare really quickly. Felt like overnight, but it was very quick. So that went away, which meant that my client budgets went away. So all of a sudden, everything I had built, it genuinely felt like it fell to rubble overnight. And when I thought about it, I was like, I really like this. I didn't envision liking it. Why do I think that I am left with nothing? And when I looked at my profile and I looked at what I talked about, at the time, everyone used profile pictures. No one even really knew what I looked like, to be honest. I talked about a market that I didn't control, in an industry that I didn't control, on a platform that I didn't control. I didn't learn the lesson to take people off platform. And no one knew who the fuck I was. So the thesis became, if I had been more me, maybe there would have been a way to continue. Maybe it wouldn't have fallen to nothing overnight. And then I was faced with what so many of us are faced with, which is, who the fuck am I? I don't know who I am anymore. And I went to AI and I was like, you're going to ask me a bunch of questions about myself. I'm going to tell you about myself, the same work I used to do with players when I helped them with their brand. I'm going to tell you about myself and you're going to tell me, why am I unique? Why am I different than anyone else trying to do this? And the insights that I got blew my mind. And I was like, why do I need a machine to tell me why I'm unique and different? And I just got obsessed from that moment forward. That was about 2 years ago, on why is it so difficult, number one, to see myself? And then how do I actually turn this into something that can, if it's going to help me and it has helped me, how can I turn this into something that can help other people? So it's this very interesting blend of neuroscience and AI and emotional intelligence that kind of all comes together, where I'm able to take people through a process over 6 to 8 weeks, where we really start from the beginning and we start with your story. We do an audit of what has happened in your life through an interview. Then we sit down. I've got an AI workflow in the back end and I'm pulling on different things here and there. We say, what does that mean? And what does that say about you? And then we go into, great, let's take ownership of the story that you actually want to share with the world. Because I don't believe storytelling is trauma spilling. I don't believe you have to share any part of yourself that you don't want to. Let's take ownership of what the world should hear from you. What do you want the world to hear? And then the final stage is, how do we articulate this in a way that your story speaks to your audience? Because that's the part a lot of people forget. They sit there and they go, this is the story I want to tell, but they don't think about the fact that it's not about the story you want to tell. It's how you want people to resonate with that story so that they know you're the person to help them.
Yeah. And I've been through this process myself as Kristina's client. And yeah, the stuff that one, you create like a real safe space to just share whatever you want to share and to ask those questions to get the story out, which, like you say, just pulls out elements that you don't necessarily think are necessarily part of your story or like your life story or how it might link to what you're doing now or what you want to do or what story you want to tell or, like you say, how you want to link to clients. But yeah, it's a really interesting process and a really like informative process as well. So that's how you get people, you interview them over a number of weeks, and then you use, like you say, AI technology to pull stuff out, understand what makes people unique and understand those elements of their story that they might want to tell for whatever purpose that might be. So how does understanding and owning your story and pulling out that story become a path to building like genuine self-trust? Because that's something that you're huge about, isn't it?
Yeah, I think for me, it's something that I saw in myself. So going through this process, when I was able to see it all on paper, and when I look at a story, I look at multiple kind of categories throughout someone's life. You look at their upbringing, their personality, early, late education, early, late career. What's their current focus? Where are they at now? And then catalytic moments or Spider-Man canon events that are moments in time that really changed the trajectory of someone's life. When you look at those categories in isolation, they don't really say much. When you look at them holistically, you start to see these really beautiful through lines and patterns and story arcs that really give people credence to the moment where they're at right now and what has informed that moment. This one big part of why I use AI. I've got a weird gift that I can sit with someone for 30 minutes and be like, that's the thing you're not talking about, and you need to talk about it more. Because I've been doing this so long, that is also something I'm working with. But when I plug it into AI, it's for the purpose of the evidence and the proof.
Yeah.
This is not my opinion. This is third-party perspective using a data set based on words that you shared with me to present back to you what we're seeing here. These are the things that make you unique. And this is the proof in everything that you've said that actually justifies that. So there's the third party component that's really helpful. The second part,
but it helps. Sorry, Kristina, but just to clarify, is it that it gives that third party thing helps give it like a sense of objectivity?
yeah,
You can trust that this is it because this isn't me blowing smoke up your ass or like having any
yeah,
particular thing. Like these are your words. This is
yeah.
what makes you unique, and we can use this process to show you. And through that, you can have that sense of genuine like knowledge
Yeah.
and confidence in what it is that you're doing because it is just an objective review of your story.
Yeah, and I never claim that AI is unbiased. It's incredibly unbiased. But when you create the right container of it with the right context, it is able to provide you with a third-party perspective on yourself that we cannot, for a variety of reasons, get from our parents, get from our closest friends and family, because we actually don't trust what they're saying.
Yeah.
We don't trust because we're like, you're biased.
Yeah.
And yet, these people around us tell us all the time, this is why you're amazing and this is why you're that. And you're like, I don't know. I can't see it. And where I geek out is the neuroscience as to why we can't see it. And there's a variety of psychological and cognitive reasons as to why. Everything from the idea of habituation, where when your brain receives stimuli, the same stimuli over and over again, it eventually starts to not be able to see that. So if you put a red dot in front of you and you stare at that dot for long enough, your brain habituates to that dot and that red dot becomes gray. It stops to see it. And that's a great thing because our brain is doing us a favor. We can't take in all the data points that we experience every day. So our brain actually says, great, don't worry, I got you. I got you, don't worry. And it starts to tell us stories about our experiences, but those stories are based on our lived experiences and they're biased to the things that we've been through, which is not always helpful and it's not always reality. Because of things like negativity bias, our brain also prioritizes negative things versus
Yeah.
positive things. So there's all these things that are going against us, and we actually need to, and this process helps to take away from all the stuff that's working against us to be like, you can't trust yourself, to making it really objective and saying, this is what is. And at that point, obviously it's a collaborative process. You decide what feels, and this is where it becomes a little hippy dippy, what feels authentic to you and what
Yeah.
feels aligned. And making this a very long answer, for me, that process, when I had my brand in the Web3 space, every time somebody had something negative or even critical to say to it, I would go back and I would shift and change. And I'm an overthinker. So I'm editing and I'm refining every single word because it wasn't really me. It was just a performance of who I was. So I felt like I needed to change it based on what other people thought. What I realized I was doing once I had come to accept this part of me, when people were shitting on me, it's not to say it doesn't hurt, but I didn't feel the need to go back and change everything because I was like, this is just me. And if me as me, that I feel that way and you feel that way, if this is just me, I can't change me. And okay, I'm not for you. And that's all right. That's a very different reality.
For sure. Okay, so we talked about how, like, the methodology of how you do it, and largely you're working with women in careers or businesses who are looking, like, say, to build their personal brand, to tell their stories, largely online.
Yeah.
But what about the average woman who doesn't own a business and isn't interested necessarily telling her story online? If we look at it from a slightly different angle, how could, like, the average woman, or could or should maybe,
Mhm.
use their story, like, online and offline? What's
Yeah.
the, what's the benefit of just knowing your story, even if you don't want to tell it publicly?
Yeah.
And how might that look in real life?
So if you are trying to sell anything, and selling can be an idea, selling can be a product, selling can be a company, whatever it is, you might be trying to sell yourself for a promotion with your boss. You might be trying to sell in an idea with the department because this is the way that you want it to go. When you look at story from a neuroscience perspective, there is a benefit to using story over facts and figures. And this is how. When our brain hears facts and figures, there's two areas of our brain that light up: processing and comprehension. So we're hearing the facts, we're processing them, we're comprehending them. Good. We can all envision that fucking one professor that sat there and was just like, blah, 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 and this is what you need to know. And then we can also envision the other professor that would get up there and would tell us about things and would tell us about the stories. Why did we respond differently? Because our brains are hardwired to respond to story differently. There is a reason that through evolutionary biology, and that gets super geeky, why did stories stay with us? If it wasn't a benefit to us, it would not have stayed with us over all of these millennia and whatever. So when our brain hears story, 6+ areas of our brain light up. So we're doing the processing, we're doing the comprehending, but all of a sudden we're doing something with the presenter of that information called neurocoupling, which is there are senses, there are emotions, there are memories, and I am all of a sudden having an experience of the information based on my own experiences. So if I say to you, I am a middle child, nothing else, and I pause, what does your brain do?
What does my brain do? It makes mine personally goes to, oh, middle child syndrome, or the fact that I'm also a middle child.
Exactly. Exactly. So even though that's just a fact, that combined with a variety of other things, you have experience with that. And our brains tell stories whether we want them to or not. So there's a massive benefit just from a biology standpoint, just from a hacking your way to being able to convince yourself or your being able to convince your audience of something you're trying to do. There's a real benefit to doing that. So that's the first part. The second part is, okay, why else would you do it? Because you're fucking sick of playing small. You have spent how long in your life living for everyone else, realizing that like your entire existence is based on what other people think of your existence versus what you think of it. For me, and what I've learned to understand story as, it is cognition. It is how I have begun to understand myself and the why. And that is a beautiful thing for my brain because I can put data to these very big feelings that I have.
And make
So
sense of them.
make sense of it. And not everything is going to make sense, and not everything is intended to make sense. And I always like to be really clear. This exercise is not about validating identities either. It is about presenting information to somebody, and what hits and what triggers with them, that's up to them to decide. I don't make that call for them, but it's about then feeling alignment. You cannot get any sort of external authority unless you have internal alignment. I don't care who you are. It may be really good in terms of followers. You are going to learn to hate it. You will not want to do it anymore.
Yeah, and it just even as you're talking about that, I guess thinking about those different ways people might use their story, I was thinking like if you're like or storytelling in general, like if you're presenting, if you're a speaker, say if you're selling something, but also understanding your story, like in relationships and friendships, like so much of knowing your story gives you such clarity on who you are and what you stand for. And I know that from going through like our own process now. And so I think that's the way in which it can help so many people, even if you're not in a business and it's not about telling your story online. Like I said, there are so many other elements of your life where you need to know what your story is. You need to know who you are. You need to know what your values are. And so much of that comes from your story and the things that you've been through. But what would you say to women who think, but I don't have the story worth telling? I know you've touched on that. You've said like even NBA clients and Olympians don't think they've got a story worth telling because people just think, oh, it's all been done before. Do you know what I mean? Nothing interesting has happened to me. What do you say to women who think that?
What we've already been talking about. The reason that you think that is because of neuroscience. Your brain can't see it. We're way too close to it. Great. Once you've accepted that, acknowledge the fact that what is very common knowledge to you is not common knowledge to other people. Again, you're spending so much time with the skills that you employ every single day to just get through your life. All of us have a framework to how we approach our days, a framework to how we approach our relationships, a framework to how it's our unique perspective and our unique approach to doing things. And people don't do things the way that you do. That is of value, especially as we're moving in the direction that we're moving in with AI, with technological shifts. People don't want to know how-tos. They want to know your perspective. And your perspective has been developed over years, over decades, because of your very unique lived experiences that you've had through your career, through your life. All of that culminates into what you bring related to your approach and your perspective. That's valuable information. And if you want to take it back even further, I promise you, everyone listening to this in their work, in their day-to-day, has figured out one element to make their job more efficient. If nothing else, if they were to think of that element and say, oh yeah, I've created that template or I've created that thing that makes this really easy. And then they think about themselves 2 to 3 years before they had that thing and think of somebody else in that position. Is that valuable information to share with somebody else? Yeah, it is. And it seems really far removed from story. It's simply about just looking at your approach to the world is unique and it's interesting. And I promise you that it's very unique and interesting to you 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah. And that leads on really nicely to my next question, which was going to be like, what changes do you see when women do actually start to really trust themselves and trust their story? What do you observe about the changes that happen for people when they do that?
So I think for me, I started thinking about this with myself related to, I felt like I could just show up, that word authentic. It just, I could show up and I could feel like I was in alignment with what I was doing. And knowing and understanding my story, being able to show up on podcasts like this, I couldn't share any of these stories 2 years ago. The way that I showed up and the way that I presented myself was very different. I'm getting the benefit of being able to engage with your audience on the neuroscience side of things, but I get the benefit of being like, this is me. That feels really good. That feels really calm and confident. And I'm able to show up in a very different way. So I felt like I was seeing my clients have this level of like more authentic expression, being able to show up as themselves. And we got to the self-trust because I was like, but why?
Yeah.
Why can you show up more authentically? And it's because the process allows people, knowing your story allows you to trust in the things that you're saying. It moves you away from performing professionalism and moves you towards just being yourself with and accepting all the things that come with that. Not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone is going to really be impressed by you. That's okay. That's actually really good because you don't want to appeal to everyone. You want to appeal to the specific people that you're trying to reach. So for me, it's really a matter of that authentic expression is amazing. But what comes on the back end of that is when you're able to show up as yourself and you're able to present yourself differently in a much more clear way, people buy from you. People buy what you're selling. People want to work with you. People want to be connected to you. People want to be close to you. And all of a sudden, you go from this really shy kid who never spoke and was fucking terrified of the entire world to being like, nah, this is what I do. This is how I do it. Speaking about it really openly and seeing my clients get the revenue benefits and get paid what they're worth because they feel really good and they trust who they are and how they show up and bring value.
Yeah. So there's that sense of authenticity, which is like a huge buzzword at the moment, isn't it? But what I'm also hearing there is clarity. And two, you're finding your tribe, whatever that means, whether that's a paying client or whether it's people you want to connect with. You're finding your tribe because you're speaking as you.
Yeah. And people want to see themselves reflected in you. People want to work with people that they see themselves in.
Yeah.
So I'm very open and honest about a lot of things about my life to the point where I don't think everyone needs to do that. But one of the things that I talk about with myself, and you know this, I always put in everything I'm posting, if you like this, bracket, and you're not afraid of queer people, follow me, do this. Why do I do that? Because I want you to know I'm queer. And if you don't like that, you can fuck right off. Don't waste my time. Don't waste your time. There's something about just being able to be like, this is me. And if you don't like, that's okay. I'm willing to accept that. But don't waste your time and don't waste my time.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So we're coming to the key lesson, key takeaway part of the episode. I want to ask you if there's one thing that you want our students, our listeners today to take away from today's lesson, one key takeaway that you would want them to remember about their story and trusting the power of their story, what would it be?
I think it's the acknowledgement that it makes sense that we don't know our story. So there's a lot of shame and blame that my clients come into the process with related to themselves because we feel like we should know this. I work with a lot of people that work with as marketers, as personal brand folks, as people that do very similar work to me. So when they come in, they go, I acknowledge the irony that I do this for people and I don't know how to do it for myself. That even more so proves the point. But there's no shame, there's no blame. That's why I say it's neuroscience, not you. INNY. Don't worry about that. That's not your fault. Great. Now that we've accepted that, it's not your fault. Know that there's something that you can do about it. And that something is not going to happen from external validation of anything. It's going to happen from you doing the internal work to better understand what's gone on in your life. What does that say about you? What does that mean about you? And then coming to terms with how do you want to actually explore that, share that with the world, put that together in a way that makes you feel really good and aligned with how you communicate yourself with the world.
So a key takeaway that people can remember about their story.
One key takeaway, it's not you, it's neuroscience. And your story is your greatest asset in your entire portfolio. Learn to understand it and gain the benefits.
Awesome. Thank you. And we all ask all of our guest teachers to give everybody a little bit of homework that's actually good for them and actually is beneficial that they would actually like to do. Can you share like a simple exercise or action that our listeners could do this week to start either exploring their story or using their story, particularly as a tool for that self-trust and authenticity? What would you suggest they do?
So I'll suggest you take a little exercise and you go internal for a minute. And a great way to show you the value of this, I have this thing called 4 stories framework, which is we really focus on 4 stories in our work together. One, what's a story that's already being told about you? We talked about this. If you live online, even if you have a LinkedIn profile, if anyone's going to it, they're telling a story about you, whether you like it or not.
Mhm.
The second story is, what are the stories that you tell yourself? And this is where I want people to focus. Forget about the other two. This is where I want people to focus. I want you to sit down and I want you to list out all the things that come to your mind when I say, you're really unique and you're really interesting and you have something unique and interesting to share with the world. What are the things that come to your mind? I'm not that interesting. Why would anyone want to listen to me? Everything I've ever said has been already said online. That's the old script. That's the old story. That's actually having a very big part in how you navigate the world. We see this a lot with people when we say, actually, I don't really like that. I've never really liked that since I was a kid. It's not really my thing. I actually hate running. I've always hated running. It's never been my thing. Like these stories that we tell ourselves that aren't actually true. They're just pieces of information based on experiences that we've decided to own and hone. And all of a sudden, it's who we are. So explore some of those things that come up related to the stories of what we tell ourselves about who we are. And then take 2 seconds and be like, is this true? That's it.
Is
Start
this
there.
true?
Is this true?
Yeah.
Is this thing about me true? And do I know it for a fact?
And then from that, they can start realizing, like you say, the stories that aren't actually stories about them are the ones that they're giving the airtime to.
Yeah, exactly. It's like peeling back the layers of that isn't your actual story. Those are just the stories that you tell yourself. And then the other 2 parts are, great. What's the story that you now want to own? When we go through this process with folks and we do the analysis, we come to, this is the story that I want to own. And the 4th one is, what's the story that people need to hear from me in order to know that I'm the person that's able to solve their problems and help them with the issues that they have, that I'm uniquely positioned to help them with.
Yeah. Awesome. Kristina, thank you so much for being our guest teacher today. Honestly, like I say, I loved going through that process with you, and I know how much or how important it is that women are able to own what is unique about them, what is valuable about them, and be able to use that story in whatever way empowers them. So thank you for sharing that today. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening. We'll share some info about Kristina in the show notes. So if anyone wants to check out what she does or drop her a message, and do let us know if you enjoyed the episode. We always love hearing from you. But other than that, have a great day, everyone. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I hope you can hear how much fun and trust that Kristina and I just have like for each other. But what I love about her message is that it reminds us confidence isn't something that you perform, that you have to pull out of yourself. It's something that you build by trusting yourself and your story fully. If you want to learn more about Kristina's StoryEQ work, her method, or connect with her online, you'll find all the links waiting for you in the show notes. And if this episode resonated, if it made you think about how much power there really is in your story and that actually your experience does count for so much, then just take a moment to reflect on what you've overcome, what you've learned, and what it's taught you about who you are, because that's where self-trust begins. So until next time, keep growing, keep showing up, and remember, you deserve a life that's as awesome as you are. Have a great day.